Hello and welcome to the very, very last G'day Anything for 2022. This is Andrew Petersen from the Business Council for Sustainable Development Australia, and I am here with a dear colleague for my last day at CBD COP15, and I'm joined today by a very, very special person who I will let her introduce, but we thought we'd lean back and show you logo for this COP, just as a sort of a quick flash. All right, so everybody, 1, 2, 3, lean back, and we lean forward. So I am joined by Bianca Brazil, and I will get her to introduce herself to yourselves in just one moment. And somewhere in this hall, we have Zabey racing furiously to get here, so we hope that she can join us. But firstly, Bianca, who are you and why are you at CBD COP15?
I am the program manager for business engagement with the CBD since 2019. And I am here to make sure that we get these businesses coming to COP15, discussing, learning, teaching, and doing stuff.
So let's show badges. That's what a badge for business NGOs looks like. That's what the Secretariat badge looks like. Very important. So, important first question for G'day Montreal. Is this your first COP?
No, this is actually my 6th COP.
Your 6th?
Yes, I've been to Nagoya. That was my first one. And at the time I worked for an NGO. So, and I've been going to COPs ever since.
Wow.
Yeah. Different experience altogether being the Secretariat though.
Well, yes.
I can tell you that it was a lot more fun when I was just a participant. I didn't have all the stress of organizing this, but there you go.
And we have her to thank for us being in the space that we're doing this right at this minute. An amazing space called Plus Quebec. I can't get it right.
Quebec.
Thank you. That is the brainchild of this person. And it has been lauded by everybody who uses it, and for the benefit of all of you, that is business and finance. There's a name up there. We have youth, we have Indigenous, we have NGOs. Do we have gender/women? Yes, women. We have women. And we've also got research, and we've got subnational governments and
faith-based organizations.
Yes.
And United Nations system.
And they're all in one, literally in one tent, a virtual tent in this room. And we all have our own space, but we all have literally line of sight to all of the other participants who are either participants or non-state actors. So kudos to you, because it's been talked about by particularly all of those parties about how successful it's been for us to come together in our own constituencies, but then learn about others as well. And I wanted to go to the question of the challenge that this particular COP was, and still is, to the extent that we don't have a deal, but we'll park that just for the moment. And I very much welcome your insights into what COVID meant to COP.
I think there's 2 sides to it. I think it was very challenging because we had to prepare basically 3 different COPs. We had one COP that was going to happen in China at first, and we had this massive place, and many things would happen because the place is simply too large. We had many ideas flowing. And then with COVID, we had to think of a scaled down COP. And then we would have a lot of virtual sessions. We wouldn't be able to have as many people on the ground. And then with the announcement to Montreal, we had a 3rd COP to prepare, and that we only had 5 months to do it. So challenges everywhere, you name it, we had it. And I'm so glad that it came all together, and it's working.
It's just astounding that it actually came together. And while I'm at it, I will do the usual Australian thing and acknowledge the brilliance of the Canadian people, the Montreal government, the Quebec government, the Canadian government, our Chinese co-hosts as well, and obviously the CBD for pulling what was, in one sense, not going to happen. And yet it did. And we get to this point in time, right literally at this moment, we're talking Saturday afternoon for us, where there is the likelihood of a deal. I wouldn't put it any higher than that just at this moment, but we're quietly cautious and confident. But I know you've got some interesting news about business. So do you want to share that with us?
Well, in a preliminary assessment that I was able to do just today, I can inform that we had more than 1,000 business participants on the ground throughout these days at COP.
Right.
And this is actually 3 times more than what we had in last COP, in COP14, when we had 318, I think.
Right.
So I think this only shows that interest is growing, awareness has been raising exponentially. I think we are now in the agenda, in the business agenda.
Mm-hmm.
But I am very curious to see how far we can take this. I think we need to engage even more with these organizations. I think we need to hold them accountable, if you will, because, we need to turn this into action.
And they've said that they wish to be held accountable, which is kind of refreshing and unusual from a certain respect. So what's been your sense of those 1,000 business people on the ground and the contribution that they're making to the dynamic that is this COP?
I think it was very interesting to see these people just walking around, and everybody came to me to say, there's a lot of business around. And, it was a refreshing surprise about the interest, but also, okay, so we need to step up the game, really. We need to, they are participating in a way in providing inputs, and they are taking the floor and they're speaking out.
Yep.
And that's good because it gives some confidence to the negotiators also about what is the deal that they're coming up with. There was a lot of skepticism about, hello.
But there's no skepticism about the fact that Eva Zabey has joined us. But I'll let you finish the thought. A lot of skepticism of business.
A lot of skepticism about, is business really going to do this? But
yes.
if you hear the voice of business actually asking us to please make it mandatory, then I think it gives some confidence to negotiators out there. I hope it does.
So that's the perfect cue. If you'd like to shuffle over this way, Bianca, that's the perfect cue for AbFab Eva Zabey. I just feel like we've got to do a group hug at this point. Photo time. Thank you. And bring you in and go back to, we've got to ask the first question because we have to ask it of everyone. First COP?
No, actually.
Okay.
Going to Bonn.
Ah, okay. Climate COPs?
Yes, I've been.
How many?
A
few.
Yeah,
okay.
Not very many.
Right.
Maybe 2.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to do a leaders board.
Oh, yes. No, I'm,
If COP first timers versus the old timers was.
I'm not an old timer.
Well, that's me. Anyway, so we're talking about holding business to account. We're talking about the business role that has been played. And Bianca just shared with us the numbers of business.
Yes. We had more than 1,000.
Drumbeat.
Yes.
More than 1,000.
More than 1,000 on the ground, retrieve the badge, and then join the and that's 3 times more than we had in Egypt. In Egypt, we had 318, I think. So.
Okay, so that's more in Egypt than I thought then.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you about the appetite of business to be here and play a fairly important role for this particular COP? And we've just been talking about how COVID played a role in this COP, how the challenges of actually bringing the COP to this point, in one sense, was acting against the opportunity of this to be a seminal moment, the Paris Agreement as it's been called. What was your take on what business wanted to bring to this COP?
Well, I think businesses understand what the Paris Agreement on climate meant for them. And so given with the delays, I guess, of COP15, it actually gave us even more opportunity to build momentum and understanding, because most companies are still relatively early on their biodiversity journey and maybe nature journey more broadly, even though many companies already understand their relationship with freshwater and their dependence on freshwater, on land, and their impacts related to pollution, for example, that they'll understand. But the broader context of all of the resources and the ecosystem services that they impact and rely on is a newer topic. So the COP15 actually acted as a real hook to drive that momentum and to encourage businesses to step up and demonstrate leadership. The Global Biodiversity Framework will then provide this political certainty to encourage companies to then scale and speed up how they innovate, their innovation, their investments, and shifting their business models. So it's quite interesting because you mentioned COVID, and I think when I started in this role, Business for Nature as a coalition is relatively young. We're only just 3.5 years old. Set up in particular to influence and to encourage an ambitious global biodiversity framework. So when I started, it was literally a 1-year countdown to what we thought was going to be the COP15 in 2020. And had that happened, I think that we would have not had as strong a business voice, because given that we had more time, that meant that did allow us to have a much bigger. Now, it did mean that we actually had a number of campaigns instead of just one campaign.
Yeah.
But it sort of in crescendo, and we could cover a number of topics, whether it was from just simply making sure that we had the evidence that companies around the world were calling for ambitious policy, and that's the call to action, nature's everyone's business. More than 1,100 companies now have signed up to that. It meant that we could also address and shine a light on the environmental harmful subsidies that we did with the B team. You know, the $1.8 trillion that unintentionally flow into subsidies that are harmful for the environment, which is all about Target 18 in the framework. And then the final crescendo was, of course, Target 15 on business and making it mandatory for all large business and financial institutions to assess and disclose their impacts and dependencies on nature. And that's a really progressive and bold policy ask coming from business to essentially say, level the playing field so that we can compete on our environmental performance alongside our financial one.
Wow. Okay. Let's go back to the CBD, because we'll come back to yourself in a minute, but let's go back to the CBD. And the thing I'm most fascinated in about their role in all of this is to be an honest broker, but to a certain extent push. Yeah. And push it, cajole, and encourage.
I think inform them, try to share with the parties the best information we have available, try to provide guidance whenever needed. And, you know, when you open the discussions, you need to have language, the initial language. That's the work of the Secretariat. So we try to include all the components. We want to make sure that everything's there. So the discussion from there will be constructive, will be positive. It doesn't always go the way we hope for, but you know, to me it was an excellent learning curve because it was my first time on that side. And there was a lot of learning to it. But I do now also see from a different perspective. Sometimes you want them to go one way, but then you realize that there's so many realities. You know, there's GDP in one country means something else in another country. So all of this is so complex. It's so interesting. It's fascinating, actually.
So remind me and remind us, how many countries are signatories again?
196.
Yeah. And so the thing I was then going to build on that was the role of the Business and Biodiversity Forum. We've had the Finance Forum for the first time ever. What were those discussions like inside the CBD about having it? Because then I'll go to what was the consequence of them for the agenda that was being driven by BFN in particular.
I think it's important to go back in history a little bit. 2012 was the first time we actually had the Business Forum. Before that, we didn't even have one. We didn't have a big moment for business back then. And that was a result of a COP decision. COP10 decision actually mentioned business for the first time, officially saying that they need to be engaged, et cetera, et cetera. So fast forward a little bit, we had the first Business and Biodiversity Forum. We had 60, 70 people in the room. It was only one panel, 1.5 hours with some ministers, some CEOs.
Wow.
And then we go back to this year where we had more than 1,000 business on the ground. So, you know, you can see the evolution. This COP was actually the COP of the innovation. So we had a finance day. We never had that before. And we can tell by the success with the business engagement that finance can only grow from now on, the engagement. It was the first time we had Plus Quebec, where we had a space for multi-stakeholder engagement and sharing. So I think, you know, if we look into everything that's happened here in the history, we're in such a good place right now.
I totally agree. And can I, without looking so much like a fanboy, but to actually call out, and Mark Goff did a brilliant LinkedIn piece today about you, but I wanted to call out particularly the way in which the bingo meetings have been run. In total contrast to climate ones, can I tell you? Because they're run by the ICC, the International Chamber of Commerce, and no criticism to the way they're done, but they are actually very matter of fact, quite clinical in a sense. Whereas, and let me contrast, COP27, they were attended, they were reasonably well attended. You had more people, we had more people in the bingo meetings coming every day than they did at COP27. And that to me has sent a very interesting signal about how business has brought this on board.
Do you know what? Do you know what I think it is also? Is that CBD is unbelievable. I have all hats off for CBD. Do you know, there's one thing that I think we maybe and we shouldn't take for granted here. It is so open.
Yeah, right.
So
yes.
open. The negotiations, apart from, of course, some that are closed door, but the contact groups on the whole, observers can listen and see what's going on. It's incredible transparency and inclusivity. And it goes exactly with what CBD and the whole team have been saying. It's a whole of society approach. It's a framework for all. And I have to really congratulate the CBD for keeping that. Now, though, you know, and I hope that that continues. But that means then that the businesses who are on the ground are key. That it was like following a football match. It was better than the football.
Nice segue.
It was because then they feel a vested interest because they know what we're trying to call for. They're part of the discussion. Yes. They can follow and see, oh, okay, so you know what's happening, and they feel part of it.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether in the climate COPs, they've grown so much, they're so big, that there's a disconnect. You know, some of the feedback on the climate COPs is that there are two COPs because there's what's going on in the NG, you know, the non-state actors, and then the actual negotiations. Whereas here, it's all also this venue is fantastic. One big venue, everyone walking up and down, everyone's in the same building, people wandering around. So I think there's a feeling of that what CBD is trying to promote is working because I think that might be why there was also maybe more. It's a newer topic for business, but they feel like they're part of it. And so our business briefings in the morning were incredibly well attended. We have 80 people one day.
Believe that.
Yeah.
I mean, I should have expected.
Early in the morning?
8 o'clock in the morning.
8 o'clock, a very rude time to have one.
Yes.
But we'll move on from that and talk about sorting out one for next year. So what was your sense of what business was saying? I mean, I shared this with our members, but what was your sense of what business was saying in those bingo meetings? And did it give you continued confidence about the agenda that Business for Nature was championing? This is a very didactic question because of course it was, but were you taking, I guess, sucker from the room to say, yes, do it harder, do it faster, don't stop. And you know, there is that zenith moment of you making the intervention, which our Russian parties weren't particularly happy about. But were you actually getting in a continuous loop, feedback from business to say, don't halter, keep going?
Yes, absolutely. And I think we were really getting that from the partners and the businesses who were present, just also in terms of acting as, it was really very straightforward messaging that we were going to. Well documented. The companies had already signed up, so they'd already got the buy-in to sign up to the Make It Mandatory campaign. And I think the exchanges we were having were sharing in a very healthy way some of the concerns, like you were saying, Bianca, around the world and in different places. It does apply in a different way. And so that intelligence and that exchange is being open to listen to what those concerns may be, to reflect carefully and then think, okay, well, what does that mean? And can we, you know, does that amend or our position in any way? The headline remains the same, but then it's like with everything, when you go into the actual texts, are there things that are maybe to find, at the end of the day, you have to find a compromise. The parties need to find a compromise in many respects while keeping it as ambitious as possible. So I think it was really a very special, serious week, a week and a half, and
it ain't over until it's
it ain't over till it's over. It ain't over till it's over. I'm feeling, everyone has their own view on what's going on. Nobody knows exactly what's going on behind the closed doors.
Well, I was
right
going to
now.
ask you, what's your latest take on what's going on?
Well, the non-paper, so this morning the CBD issued the non-paper, which is essentially the text that's agreed and the agreed bracket. So it's just a clean version that then it's really helpful, because then it says, okay, this is the latest that then the ministers are now discussing. In target 15, mandatory is still bracketed. But the rest of the target related to assessment and disclosure is already really strong. It's pretty strong. So we hope that mandatory stays in. Our understanding is that there is quite a lot of support for it. So we're quite hopeful that and optimistic. But again, it ain't over till it's over, and that's up to the parties to decide.
Yep.
One thing that the parties did not have a chance to discuss, or at least they went straight to the ministers, was the reduction of the 50% of negative impacts. It's well, our understanding is some of the numerical figures are just going straight to the ministers, that they're not taking time to debate too much
The text itself.
among the negotiators. And I think that would be really strong if that was kept in. But given that they haven't been spending a lot of time discussing it, I don't know. We don't know what's going to happen to that, which would be, I think, a shame, because hand in hand, ultimately, we know that the assessment and disclosure is not a means. It's not an end in itself. It's a means to large scale action. And the action of saying, well, we're supposed to be reducing by 50% our negative impacts by 2030 is also a really strong signal that you can totally bring into each and every company and say, okay, well, what does that mean for us if we're going to reduce by half? So anyway, let's see. It's still a bit early, and we wish them all the best. And I think tomorrow morning is the next version, I believe. And so it's really on the clock now. It's going round and round, trying to sort everything out. And a very important message, though, is that one thing that's also everyone's talking about is we need to keep the ambition high, but you also need the resource mobilization, and they go hand in hand. So the discussions that are taking place is, if you want a really ambitious framework, you've got to get the funding in place and the resources, which are financial, but also the capacity building and everything that goes with it, in place as well.
Yeah.
So if you can't have a low ambition and then lots of resources, or low resources and high ambition, it's not going to work. So they have to be together in sync.
Which then comes to the question about the next steps. We've been talking about that as part of the GPBB, and we've been sharing as part of the partnership of the Business for Nature what it could look like, without giving away at this stage, because, as you say, it's not over until it's over. So you obviously got to modify and amend and reflect as a result. But what should business understand even right now? About what it should be doing, even if, and I find some wood to knock on, there isn't a deal done. What should business be doing right now? Hearing what they're hearing, taking away from the work that's going on in GPBB, what the policy action that's been going on by Business for Nature. What should they be doing? And I'm talking about, and this is important because we've talked about this in the last couple of sessions. Here we've got those who are at the cutting edge, maybe not the bleeding edge anymore. I think that's actually moved on. That was probably a few COPs ago, but this is now those who are very much at that innovator and arguably first follower level. And now we're going into the great unwashed in business that need to know what to do. So a sense of what to do or where to go, and I'm talking high level, I'm not talking detail. What would you say?
I think even if we don't manage to get a deal here, I think there are many countries who are supportive of action. And I think countries,
including Australia.
Exactly.
Peeps, can I say? Yes.
So depending on what comes out of it, countries will then would anyway go back and try to build frameworks and legislation to make sure that implementation happens. the countries that are actually supportive, and if they feel that the agreement is not up to the level that we're hoping for, they can still legislate about it. They can
Exactly.
still
That's true.
do things. And the second thing is, we do have ICC and large WBCSD,
Yes.
which are large business organizations that can implement private policies.
Yep.
And if we are talking about cutting edge businesses and leadership from businesses, there is nothing better that I could imagine than good private policies coming back to hunt us in the coming COP. Okay, so you didn't do it here, we deliver.
But hey, here's the roadmap for you to be able to do it, even if it's not done
Exactly. It
by
can be done.
consensus as a result. Eva?
Yeah, and building on that, I would just say, I mean, if I was running a business right now, I would be preparing to assess and disclose impact and dependencies on nature. There's no doubt about it. Like, it's coming.
It has to be done.
It has to be done. And then starting to really invest in nature and start understanding what it means, because the regulatory environment's going to catch up. But what's already changed now are the social norms, and that dictates action also already. So I think that what we've got to be careful about is we've managed to create this momentum, and it's incredible that now finally nature and biodiversity specifically that needed a bit of TLC has gone up the business agenda. We've got to keep it up there. And that means kick off, right, as hard as it is to say, given that we all now want to have a break, as of January,
there's a lot of work.
Full on into a, joint work plan for all of the business action. We have to all work as one team because we need to get to the scale and speed now. We know what to do. The solutions are there. And it's simply about making sure we're communicating in a consistent way and equipping companies with the right meaningful actions to take.
Okay, so last question, and in doing so, let me both wish you a very Merry Christmas and a happy holidays. But it's a kind of a weird question, but hopefully you get where I'm coming from.
I wouldn't expect anything less.
Thank you. It's Christmas Day, and your 8-year-old son, nephew, friend across the road, and the 88-year-old grandfather, uncle, both ask in different ways, so what have you been doing over the last 3 weeks? And why was that important?
I would say that we're trying to get as many people as possible behind a very, very good cause for everyone. And hopefully we'll be very proud of what we built.
Yeah. Good answer.
That's a good answer, Bianca. I actually asked, we did a little team challenge before we came, and we all had to record someone in our family or a friend say, what do you think what I'm going, what are we going to go and do in Montreal?
Yep.
And I asked my 6-year-old, I was like, so Nathan, what do you think I'm going to be doing in Montreal? He's like, I literally have no idea. I was like, what? Okay. But he does know that I work for nature. So I would say we're trying to change the rules of the game so that we can all live within the limits of our one precious planet.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much.
Sorry I was late.
Not at all. Thank you so much for the support you've given our organisation over the years that we've been working with you. We look forward to future further years of fun, laughter and engagement, however that may look, in whatever environment, literally, metaphorically, we're talking about. Again, a big thank you to the good burgers of the city of Montreal. I think we all would agree that this has been an incredibly well-run COP.
Fantastic.
And offline, both Bianca and I agree that I would probably consider this to be my second best COP. And if we get a deal, it will go to number 1. So,
fingers crossed.
I also want to give a shout out to Lee Murray and Anton Strauss, who've been helping with the back of house media and comms. A big thank you for your efforts. And of course, to the members of BCSD Australia, who of course made it possible for me to be on the road for 2 and a bit months in all of the manifestations that I've had over that period of time. I hope they found it valuable and useful. To those who've been watching live and also on YouTube, again, I hope you found it useful and interesting and that you subscribe, because there's nothing like those key algorithms on YouTube to tell people how important we are. But for now, from all of us here at the CBD at COP15, thank you for joining us. Have a safe, happy, Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and stay tuned, fingers crossed for a really great outcome, hopefully in the next 24, I was going to say 48, 48 hours.
And thank you, Andrew.
Oh, thank you.
Really, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And with that, bye for now, and see you back in Australia at some point, people. Bye.
Bye.